Ian McLaren has distinguished himself in great Scottish stories. He tells a tale about a guy named Lachlan Campbell and his daughter Dora. And it seems that Dora left home, fell in with a bad crowd, and would not respond to her father's letters. He wrote to her constantly, and she did not respond at all. And he'd write all the time, and she ignored every single thing that he wrote. However, her Aunt Maggie wrote a letter that melted her heart. And this is what she said, what she wrote. Dora, your daddy is a grieving ya. Come home for your own sake. Come home for your dear daddy's sake, but Dora, come home most of all for the dear Lord's sake. The invitation for Holy Communion is simply the invitation to come home. John described the incarnation. The incarnation is a theological word that some of you don't know what that means. Incarnation, if you break that word down in Greek, you have the word carne, incarnation. And carne means meat. So any of you ever had chili con carne? You have chili with meat. And the incarnation is the time when Jesus put on meat. The Son of God put on flesh. So John, writing about the incarnation, when Jesus, the Son of God, put on flesh, he said, he came to his own home, and his own people received him not. The word for home is the exact same word that's used for mansion in the Greek language. Some versions, Jude read in John chapter 14, in my Father's house are many mansions. Some say rooms. It's the same word. Jesus went to prepare a place for us, which will be our eternal home. Meanwhile, he said, the Father and I shall come and make our home in you. Apostle Paul said, when I'm in the body, I'm away from the Lord. I long to go home to the Lord. And yet, as you study the context of his writings, you recognize what you could call the gripping nowness of what he has said. The old has passed away. The new has come. Now is the acceptable time. I believe that the thrust of that passage is that there is a quality of relationship with the living God that is like truly being at home. And it begins now. You know, when you know Jesus, death is not feared. That our dying is no more than just a transition in our living. That our going home will be secure because we have been at home with the Lord during the days of our lives here on earth. Home's not a place. Home is a person. Home's not a position, an address with a mortgage. Home is a passion. Home is where the heart is, and the heart is where Jesus is. If you take the word sin and use that as an acrostic, you know what an acrostic is, you take the first letters of the word. If you take the word sin as an acrostic, you could see S stands for separation, I stands for independence, and N stands for negativism. Let me show you that again. Sin stands for separation, independence, negativism. That's sin. Sin is separation from God. It is to be independent and to run your own life. It is negative about the amazing potentials and surprises that God has for us each and every day. To be a sinner is to be one who is any part of his or her life separated from God. One who is trying to go it alone. Now, I would suggest that there are people like the prodigal son who are away from home. Some who are away because they've never known what home is like. Some have never, ever met Jesus, who've never known his gracious, forgiving love. But there are still some who know him, and they live in fear because there are areas of their lives that are not under his control. And when you get to the table, the communion table, you feel unworthy, and your past experiences ache, and memories just flood in. And then there are those who have both met him and know him. And they've moved closer to him, and they've discovered something about the nature of God. They have seen the door into eternity. They've seen that door swing wide open, and their souls have been satisfied. The people who know it all have never really come face to face with the living Lord because they know everything. To know him is to know that you have barely begun to grow. I would suggest that we need to come here in all areas of our lives. From all of the alternatives, from those who believe they have nothing left to learn because they've met Jesus, away from the attitudes of those who have an independent living. There's all sorts of people anywhere on either side and all in between. Every time we come to the table, we're reminded of things that we have said. We're reminded of things that we have done. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have an experience that we could come and have all of those things that rob us of his joy, all of those things that seem to mess with our lives, that we could take them in prayer and destroy that power? Wouldn't that be wonderful? What is it that alienates us from the Lord? One guy said, there seems to be a tapestry between the Lord and me. And I hear him calling, but I can't see him. And there's something between the two of us. Well, let me ask it this way. What stolen threads weave together the tapestry of your separation? What makes it difficult for you to see or hear Jesus? Are they your plans for the future? Have you planned without consulting him? If so, he'll give you strength. Many of us are perhaps in far-off countries in broken relationships. Maybe far-off countries of criticism. Maybe far-off countries of settled opinions where we hurt others by placing them in categories or words that we say. And because we do that, we separate ourselves from them and have no hope of befriending or reaching. Jesus is saying, leave that judgment in the far country. Come home to me. Let me give you a new relationship with me and others as you come to my table. You know, there are people who have known the pain of spoken and unspoken words. Can you think of any time, don't say it out loud, can you think of any time when you have said something and you thought, why did I say that? Or have you had a time when you thought, I missed that opportunity, I should have said something? You know, there are parents There are parents whose efforts at shaping their children seem to be met with futility and rebellion. Sometimes it's the kid's fault, sometimes it's the parent. I just saw the other day, it's in Walmart, one of my favorite stores, and there was this big guy, was a dad, and he had his little boy who was maybe about 3 or 4 years old, said, "Get in line with me now!" And I thought, wow, you have to go home with this guy. And that's not uncommon. Jesus says to every single one of us, stop playing God. Let me take that. Let me forgive that. Let me give you a new beginning. When the sailors took the body of Admiral Nelson and carried it to the cathedral, it was draped with the Union Jack. And later on, his body was carried to the graveside. And when his body was being lowered into the grave, there was a whistle blown. And soldiers who had served him ripped the flag from the casket. And as they did that, they shouted, "I've got a piece of him, and I will never, ever forget him." Well, this morning, we have a piece of him, and we should never, ever forget him. This morning, we are gathered here as one body. That was my request. This will be the last time that I will serve you as the pastor communion. And I didn't want to have 2 services. I thought, let's all get together to do this together. But also, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I'm thankful for Jude for this. When I was ordained, I got this chalice, which is made of olive wood from Bethlehem. I've never used it because it leaks. And thanks to Jude, it is fixed in such a way that it won't leak. And so I wanted, as our final time, to be able to serve you with this chalice for the first time. First and only time. So, I invite you to come to the table. I invite you to come home. And we're going to do this a little bit differently because there's only going to be 2 of us in the front now instead of 4. And so what I'd like to do, this can be an organized mess, but I'm going to trust you to be able to see who gets in and out of the pews. Jude's going to have the bread, which will represent the body of Christ. I'm going to hold my chalice. And I invite you to come and share together. I invite you to come home. You know, we can have this time. You could share in communion many, many, many times, but the one thing that I have always said when we've had this table is open to everyone, as long as you have a heart that desires to follow Jesus. If that's you, in a sense, what that says is, I invite you to come home.